All right, buckle up because today we are really diving deep into the lean startup.
It's a modern classic, no question about it.
Seriously, entrepreneurs swear by this book. Eric Ries really seems to have cracked the code on building a successful business in today's world.
Right. And it's not just for tech startups either. The lean startup principles, they can apply to any industry, any size company, even inside a massive corporation.
Okay, so what's the big secret? What makes the lean startup so revolutionary?
Well, it's all boils down to this. Ditch the old school business plan. You know, that rigid, set in stone document that nobody ever reads after you write it.
Been there, done that. It's like this book is saying, hey, it's okay to embrace the unknown, to experiment, to pivot.
Exactly. It's about validated learning, getting out of the building, and testing your assumptions with real customers.
So it's less about having all the answers up front and more about being adaptable, agile.
Exactly. It's about building, measuring, learning, and iterating, constantly refining your product or service based on real-world feedback.
And this applies even within a massive company. Because, let's be honest, those big corporations can be slow-moving, bureaucratic.
You're telling me. But Rees argues that even within these large organizations, you can create what he calls islands of freedom. These are spaces where teams can operate with more autonomy, more like a startup within a larger company.
It reminds me of Intuit, actually. They're this massive company, but they managed to launch SnapTax, this incredibly successful mobile app. Did they have one of those islands of freedom?
They did. The SnapTax team, they were given the freedom to experiment, to iterate rapidly, and to make decisions based on customer feedback, not just on what some executive in a corner office thought was best.
So it's about finding those pockets of agility, even within a well-established structure.
Right. And speaking of agility, let's talk about one of the core principles of the lean startup. Validated learning. It's not enough to just have a brilliant idea. You've got to test it in the real world.
It's like that old saying, ideas are cheap, execution is everything.
Absolutely. And that's where so many entrepreneurs stumble. They fall in love with their product, their vision, without ever really testing their assumptions.
They're so convinced that they've got the next big thing that they forget to ask the most important question. Does anyone actually want this?
Exactly. Take IMVU, for example. They had this idea for an instant messaging platform with avatars.
Okay, I mean, it sounds kind of cool, but
It flopped hard. People didn't want another IM add-on. They wanted a standalone platform to connect with new people.
so what did they do?
They pivoted. They went back to their customers, they listened to their feedback, and they realized that their initial assumption was wrong.
So they changed course based on actual data, not just their gut feeling.
Exactly. And that's the power of validated learning. It's about constantly testing your assumptions and being willing to pivot when necessary.
It's like adjusting your sails based on the wind, rather than blindly following a course that might lead you straight into a storm. And speaking of testing the waters, let's talk about another one of Ries's groundbreaking concepts, the minimum viable product, or MVP.
Ah, the MVP, the cornerstone of the lean startup.
It sounds counterintuitive though, right? I mean, why would you ever launch a product that's not, perfect?
It's not about launching a crappy product. It's about launching a product that allows you to learn as quickly as possible.
Okay, so it's about getting something, anything, in front of your customers to start gathering feedback.
Precisely. And the goal is to do this with the least amount of effort and resources possible. You're not aiming for perfection at this stage. You're aiming for learning.
Okay, I'm starting to see the light here. So instead of spending months, maybe even years, building the perfect product, you're advocating for a more iterative approach, right?
Exactly. Look at Groupon, for example. Their MVP was incredibly simple. It was a basic WordPress website offering a single daily deal for a local pizza place.
No fancy tech, no complex algorithm, just pizza and a dream.
Right. And it was enough to validate their core assumptions.
And I'm guessing people were hungry for a deal because that simple website sparked a massive movement.
They were. That bare-bones MVP allowed Groupon to answer a ton of crucial questions without sinking a ton of money into a product that might not have worked.
Like, were people even interested in online deals?
Exactly. Could they handle the logistics of partnering with local businesses?
Is their technology scalable?
They were able to figure all of that out early on thanks to their MVP.
So they were gathering real-world data, figuring out what worked, what didn't, without betting everything on one big idea.
Exactly. And that data-driven approach, well, that's central to another key concept in the lean startup. It's called innovation accounting. Basically, it's about shifting your focus.
Shifting your focus how? From what to what?
from vanity metrics to actionable metrics. You see, it's not enough to just track numbers that look good on paper.
Yeah, like how many downloads your app has or how many likes you get on social media. Those are vanity metrics.
Exactly. Those metrics, they might feel good, but they don't necessarily translate to real business growth. Actionable metrics, on the other hand, those are the numbers that actually move the needle.
Okay, so give me an example. What's an actionable metric?
Let's say you're building an e-commerce site, right? A vanity metric would be the number of visitors to your website. An actionable metric, though, that would be the conversion rate, the percentage of visitors who actually make a purchase.
Ah, I see. So it's not just about getting people in the door. It's about getting them to take that next step to become paying customers, right?
Precisely. And the lean startup is all about identifying those key metrics, those actionable metrics that really matter for your business.
And then figuring out how to optimize for them. Right.
Exactly. But it's not always easy. Sometimes, you have to be willing to challenge your assumptions, to pivot your strategy, even if it means letting go of an idea that you're really attached to.
It's like that old saying, what got you here won't get you there.
Exactly. And one of the toughest decisions an entrepreneur has to make is this: pivot or persevere. You've poured your heart and soul into this idea, but the data is telling you it's time for a change. What do you do?
It's the entrepreneur's dilemma.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to kill your darlings
Right.
to walk away from something you've invested so much in.
It's tough, no doubt. But sometimes it's absolutely necessary. Look at Votizen, for example. They started out with this vision of building a social network for verified voters.
Okay, noble goal, but
But they quickly realized that their growth model wasn't sustainable. So they did something that a lot of entrepreneurs are afraid to do. They pivoted, not just once, but multiple times.
wow, multiple pivots. Talk about embracing uncertainty.
Right. And each time, they used data and customer feedback to guide their decisions. They weren't afraid to experiment, to try new things, even if it meant scrapping months of work.
That takes guts, for
Sure.
sure. But it sounds like that agility, that willingness to pivot, was key to their eventual success.
Absolutely. And that's what the lean startup is all about. It's about embracing the unknown, being willing to experiment, and most importantly, being willing to pivot when necessary.
It's about failing fast, learning from those failures, and coming back stronger, right?
Precisely. And one of the best ways to fail fast and learn quickly is to embrace the idea of small batches. It's a concept borrowed from lean manufacturing.
Small batches, like instead of baking a whole cake, you bake a cupcake first to see if you like the recipe.
Exactly. The idea is to break down large, complex tasks into smaller, more manageable chunks.
So you can identify problems more quickly, right? And course correct before you've invested a ton of time and resources.
Precisely. And this principle, it applies to so much more than just physical products. We're talking software development, education, even military hardware.
Okay, now you've piqued my interest. How does this small batch approach work in those fields?
Take software development. Instead of spending months building out an entire feature, you can use a small batch approach to develop a bare bones version, a prototype, and get it in front of users quickly.
So you can get feedback early on and make sure you're building something that people actually want.
Exactly. And if it turns out that people don't want it, well, you've only wasted a few weeks of development time instead of a few months.
Makes sense. And what about education? How does the small batch approach apply there?
Well, think about personalized learning. Instead of having students go through a whole semester of a course that might not be right for them, you can use a small batch approach to test out different teaching methods, different curriculum, and see what works best for each individual student.
It's like having a custom-fit education.
Exactly. And the small batch approach, it can be applied to so many different areas. It's all about maximizing learning, minimizing waste, and adapting quickly to change.
So it's not just about working smarter, it's about working differently.
Yeah.
It's about challenging those traditional notions of efficiency and productivity.
Absolutely. And that can be tough for people who are used to doing things a certain way. But the results, they speak for themselves.
Yeah, it's good enough for Toyota, it's probably good enough for us, right?
Exactly.
It makes you wonder why we haven't always done things this way?
Right. But it's a big shift in mindset, especially for larger companies.
Because it's all about breaking down those silos, right?
Yeah.
Those departmental barriers that can really stifle innovation.
Exactly. The lean startup approach, it's all about collaboration, communication, and rapid iteration. It's about building a culture where everyone feels empowered to experiment and to learn from their mistakes.
So it's not just about changing the way we work. It's about changing the way we think about work.
Absolutely. And one of the most powerful tools that Ries talks about is something called the 5 whys analysis. Have you heard of this?
Yeah, we touched on it earlier. It's about getting to the root cause of a problem, right? Instead of just slapping a Band-Aid on the symptoms.
Exactly. It's so easy to get caught up in firefighting mode to just fix the immediate problem and move on. But the 5 whys analysis, it forces you to slow down, to dig deeper, to ask why, until you get to the heart of the matter.
Give me an example. How would this work in a real-world scenario?
Okay, let's say you're running an e-commerce site, right? And you're noticing that your sales have plateaued. So you ask, why have sales plateaued? And maybe the answer is, well, our website traffic has decreased.
So you ask, why has website traffic decreased?
Right. And maybe the answer is, well, our search engine rankings have dropped. So you ask, why have our search engine rankings dropped? And on until you've asked why 5 times.
And by that point, you've probably uncovered some underlying issue that you wouldn't have found otherwise.
Exactly. It might turn out that your website's SEO was never really that strong, or that your content marketing strategy needs an overhaul, or maybe you made some changes to your website that accidentally hurt your search rankings.
So the 5 whys analysis, it helps you to connect the dots to see the bigger picture.
Right. And it helps you to make more informed decisions about where to focus your efforts, because once you understand the root cause of a problem, you can address it at its source, rather than just treating the symptoms.
It's like that old saying, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. You're not just solving problems, you're building a more resilient, more adaptable organization.
Exactly. And that's what the Lean Startup is all about. It's about building a culture of continuous improvement, of experimentation, of embracing uncertainty, and most importantly, of always putting the customer first.
And that's a message that resonates whether you're a solopreneur working out of your garage or a Fortune 500 CEO. So to wrap things up, what's the one big takeaway you hope our listeners will walk away with from this deep dive into the Lean Startup?
It's this. The old way of doing things, the way of rigid plans and waterfall development, it's just not cutting it anymore. In today's fast-paced world, the most successful companies are those that are agile, adaptable, and customer-centric. And that's what the Lean Startup is all about. It's a roadmap for navigating the unknown, for embracing failure as a learning opportunity, and for building products and services that people actually want.
It's about challenging the status quo, experimenting relentlessly, and never losing sight of the customer. So go out there, embrace the Lean Startup methodology, and build something amazing.
Absolutely. The future of innovation belongs to those who are bold enough to experiment, to learn, and to adapt.